I think it'd be important to touch on a few details about Michael Mazzola. He is not only the director of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, he also was the director of Unacknowledged back in 2017, which was Dr. Greer's second documentary. He also donated funds to Dr. Greer's first documentary, Sirius. He's an award-winning filmmaker who started making documentaries in middle school. He became interested in UFOs and conspiracies while studying film at NYU, and Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind has become a major success. See, we're waiting for him to rejoin. Here we go. Apologies for the delay, everyone. It's a big day today. Wow, the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Mazzola. It's an honor having you here in the live stream, my friend. I know you're a very busy guy. You have a lot going on, a lot on your plate. So thank you for taking the time to come talk to the community and for everything you've done for humanity, which is monumental.
Well, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Dude, of course. I'm a man of research, so I did my due diligence, and I went ahead and I watched the first Unacknowledged again, which I haven't watched in over a year, just to refresh myself on it. This morning I rewatched Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind just to get my mind in the place of the subject we're going to be talking about. I know I just did your intro before you got in here, but I feel as though for someone of your stature and your accomplishments, I need to go ahead and give you a proper intro, Michael. An award-winning filmmaker who started making documentaries in middle school. He became interested in UFOs and conspiracies while studying film at NYU and went to direct Dr. Greer's second worldwide hit, Unacknowledged, and Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, both having major success. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind has reached #1 on the Apple and Amazon online stores. Everybody welcome Michael Mazzola. Again, thank you for being here. So
yeah, of course, man.
I have a few questions lined up for you. Now, I'm not really going to go in the order in which I wrote them. I'm just going to throw something at you. We'll see where the conversation goes. You're very much an intellectual guy. I've listened to a lot of conversations you have, so I'm interested to see where it goes. So first off, what was your vision for creating Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind? What message did you want to convey besides all the information Dr. Greer wanted to pack into the film?
That's a good question. When I first met Dr. Greer back in 2015, I think it was December of 2015, to talk about his vision for Unacknowledged, it was clear that was the right movie for that moment in time. That was the film that people were going to be ready for.
Yeah.
But the film he'd always dreamt of making for like 30 years was Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. But we had to do Unacknowledged first as kind of like the disclosure potty training to get people ready for the really deep stuff.
Like a good primer.
In this new film. Yeah, exactly. So this is something that is, so deeply personal to Dr. Greer. It's his whole life's mission. People think that, he's all about the Disclosure Project, but he'll tell you, I think he says in the movie, it was an accident of history. He never wanted to be the disclosure guy. He wanted to be the CE5 guy, Yeah. But he did the disclosure stuff out of a sense of duty. That's a whole other story. So, it was a big responsibility for me, to, take on the responsibility of telling like the most important story, the most personal thing for Dr. Greer. I didn't want to let him down. And also, the subject matter is it's so out there for most people. I was really worried, the way Dr. Greer put it was like, if we're not careful, people will equate this to like, we're just going out in the desert with Ouija boards to, have a seance with aliens and people are going to think we're nuts. So we really had to figure out, okay, how do we present this in a way where people's heads don't, just completely explode in the first 10 minutes and they turn it off. And so that's why we sort of came up with this idea to do the first 40 minutes is kind of like a recap of Unacknowledged, but also an update on what's happened since then with all the To the Stars Academy stuff. I mean, that wasn't happening really when we made Unacknowledged.
Yeah.
And we think, and our sources kind of confirm, that a lot of the TTSA stuff was kind of in response to what we were doing with Unacknowledged. I mean, not to take all the credit, but Unacknowledged is, depending on how you crunch the numbers, it's the most watched documentary ever, or it's one of them.
600 million views.
Just on piracy,
Yeah,
so we're definitely moved the needle. And it was funny because I honestly thought that Unacknowledged would like go on Vimeo, and if it got 500,000 views, I would have been just so excited. I never thought in a million years it would end up on Netflix or anything like that. It was totally surreal. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. So so to answer your question, I don't know if I'm really answering it, but vision for this, Dr. Greer's had this story in his heart for 30 years. It was kind of my job to figure out, like, how do we present this in a way where it's gonna unfold logically? Because I mean, CE5, you have to understand like 28 different things independently, and then put them all together at the end. So we went through a few iterations of editing the movie and organizing it in different ways, and then I finally so it was more like trial and error than really having because the original script that we laid out, I ended up not following it because it just wasn't working. So there was a lot of trial and error to try to figure out, okay, how is this going to make sense?
Well, I'm actually really happy that you brought up, not to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned there's like 25 different steps to go through the CE5 protocol, which actually leads us perfectly into the next question I had laid out for you. Which component out of the CE5 protocols, which step or variable do you feel is the most crucial in achieving a successful CE5? Personally, for my team and I, we've been going out and conducting CE5 expeditions for over 3 months now. And out of the four expeditions we've done, we've had 4 out of 4 amazing contact experiences following step-by-step Dr. Greer's protocol. And along with the fact that everyone in our group has a great relationship with each other, and that coherence is there, we're all vibrating at the frequency of love, and we're definitely just emitting out good vibes. So in your opinion, what do you feel as though is the most important aspect for anyone or an individual or a group that wants to go out and have successful CE5?
Awesome question. Now, disclaimer, I can't speak for Dr. Greer, even though I'm on his Instagram page. But my perspective on this is that CE5 at its essence is you are projecting an intention. You are projecting an intention that is strong enough and coherent enough that somebody else can pick up on it. In this case, the somebody else is an ET civilization. And so that's really all that you're doing. And the rest of the protocols are there because, most of us have rats in our brain and we can't project a clear intention. I know people who can just literally step outside and put out the intention, and with an open heart, and ETs will appear. I had a producer on the last film, Unacknowledged. That was his first CE5. He was having dinner with Dr. No, it was Chris Crescitelli. And he told me, he was having dinner with Dr. Greer, and he's like, are you telling me that if I just step outside and with an open heart put out the desire to make contact, they'll appear? And he's like, yeah. And Chris said, okay, I'll be right back. And he stepped outside the restaurant and he did this, and it changed his life. He had a giant craft appear, and that's when he became the UFO nut, right? Wow. So ultimately that's what you're doing. But most of us have rats in our brain and can't just set an intention like that. So that's why we have the CE5 protocols. I'm just making a distinction between what a CE5 is and what the protocols are. The protocols are all about, using meditation, remote viewing, and sounds, and all these other really useful, effective tools to get you into a state where you can send a clear intention.
Awesome.
So that's the distinction, I think, that's really important for people.
Awesome. I think you explained that as straightforward and very thoroughly as possible. Also, something else I wanted to touch on with you too. I watched a lot of interviews with you up to this, just so I could have a clear, image of your personality. And from what I've heard in previous interviews is prior to doing your own research, you were operating from a paradigm of very reductionist, materialistic type of outlook on the world, if I use the right terms for that. So at what point in the process of you directed Unacknowledged, you directed Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. In that timeline of things, when did you shift from the skeptic to this is your truth?
Yeah, so it was way before Unacknowledged. As you know, because you saw the other interviews, excuse me, I was a hardcore skeptic. I loved debunking all this stuff. And I was really vicious. And then, it wasn't until I started looking at arguments against my position that my position totally collapsed, and I realized that all my skeptical friends weren't skeptics at all. They're not skeptical of the media. They're not skeptical of their favorite politicians. They're not skeptical of the scientific establishment. They're not skeptical of the intelligence agencies. They're really just cynical debunkers. And, they had this line that I really took to heart, which was extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And it's like, well, the extraordinary evidence is there. And I feel like
that's a Carl Sagan line almost. I feel like I've definitely heard that come out of Sagan at some point.
It was either Sagan, it was like, this is like the Michael Shermer, Sam Harris, James Randi kind of crowd. Yeah. And they are so dishonest while, putting on this air of, we're just trying to protect science and truth and, and intellectual inquiry, and we're open-minded, and, we don't fall for superstitions. But of course they're sucked into the biggest superstition of all, which they can't see, which is materialism, which, if they would just look at, a decent argument against their position would totally collapse. So that's what I did. And I didn't want any of this stuff to be true. I was hostile towards it. And, then I'd ask myself, okay, well, why? Why did I not want any of this stuff to be true? And, the answer I always give, and you've seen my other interviews, is because then you have to take responsibility for the information, right? So I started getting really, but it's true, man. And I think we as a community really underestimate how big of a block that is for our friends and for our family members who just can't confront the idea of ETs or the reality of consciousness or conspiracies, this cognitive dissonance. It's not because they're not convinced by the evidence. There's so much evidence. It's ridiculous.
It's like, what do they do?
It's not. Yeah. It's like, well, exactly. I mean, it's really intimidating to say, oh, I have to accept this reality and then I have to take responsibility for this knowledge. Or if you're talking about consciousness, I now have to take responsibility for my own happiness and for the reality that I'm creating. That's a huge burden to put on somebody.
Yeah, because then you're no longer a victim of life.
Exactly.
A lot of people let me rephrase this. A lot of people would rather be blissfully ignorant and then make themselves a victim of circumstance rather than realizing the true human potential that we all have, this co-manifesting creating ability through this singularity of consciousness. And as an example, I've had this conversation with a lot of friends I've grown up with, and not to call myself a skeptic as though I would receive evidence and then still deny it and have that cognitive dissonance. I just would genuinely need to experience it to have that shift of my perspective of things. And back in 2013, as I was mentioning earlier in this live before you came on, my first experience, I had these 3 orbs come over my small suburban town in New Jersey. and it completely shattered everything that I thought could be possible for an object moving, its illumination, its propulsion. It was materializing and dematerializing. And then since that point, I've seen 7 other sightings in my life, all coincidentally at the perfect timing when I was looking at exactly the right place at the right time. And it really makes you realize that all of the scientific method and our systematic ways of living, they're very narrow in understanding and grasping the big picture. So I love that example you gave. When I heard you say that, that was the best example I've ever heard, because you have to take responsibility for the information, and people don't want to take responsibility.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, dude, it's totally true. And that was just me looking within myself, you know, because I was horrified by the idea that we create our own reality. You know, I was horrified by that idea. I was horrified by the idea that there were aliens and all this stuff. Not because I was afraid of them, but just because I didn't want to deal with this. You know, I was happy living my miserable life. You know, and I was kind of lazy. I just didn't want to deal with it. And I didn't have an experience. I didn't have a sighting like you did. I didn't have a near-death experience. You know, most people get into this space because they have some kind of transcendent experience or a UFO sighting. I didn't have any of that. It was just looking at the evidence. The evidence is there for anyone who is honest enough with themselves. The evidence is there to get totally on board with all of this stuff, with the science of consciousness, with the reality of ETs. It's all there. And so I donated to the movie Sirius, and I went to the premiere in LA, which was totally crazy because they were like, it was like, you know, they filled 2 theaters and people were sitting on the floor. I was sitting on the floor in the second theater, and
and you donated for the film. That's incredible.
And I donated $1,000 to the movie or something.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I met this guy, Adam Curry, who's in Close Encounters, and he was in Sirius.
Yeah, great guy.
Adam is he's incredible. And I encourage everyone to Google, I think it's on Vimeo. It's a presentation he gave a couple years ago. It's called A Glimpse of Consciousness Technology. And he gives a little PowerPoint presentation about, you know, how materialism is breaking down and the sort of new paradigm that's emerging that acknowledges consciousness, and the technology he's building that actually allows us to interface with consciousness. And, you know, this is like, you know, if you take what Adam's doing and then put like 1 million years of evolution on top of it, you'd probably have an ET civilization.
Exactly.
And he makes it so entertaining and interesting. It's called The Glimpse of Consciousness Technology. Go check it out. He's a total genius. So I started working with him, and then I actually was watching a video that Greer, because I became such a fan of his, and I saw on YouTube he was giving some kind of lecture, and he's like, yeah, we're actually looking for someone to make the next movie. And I shot him an email, and I never thought that I would hear back, but I did. And then the rest is history.
Well, the film came out absolutely incredible. I love how you guys designated that first 40 minutes just to kind of give a brief recap and a rundown of like the situation and the dynamic of everything, because the levels of secrecy that this subject is undergoing right now is so multifaceted and so complex that if you don't explain it in the manner you guys did, an average person that is diving into this for the first time, they're going to get, you know, as we said in the Army, lost in the sauce. They're not going to know exactly what's going on. There's so many different characters involved, so much different research, examples, evidence. You guys broke the film down chronologically perfect. I thought you guys...
Oh, thank you.
You guys hit the nail on the head with it. And even also being a musician, the scoring for the film as well, the visuals with the music just made it so much more impactful, and it was just entertaining to watch. I've watched it since it came out, and I donated to this film as well. I didn't donate to the previous one.
Oh, thank you.
I had to donate to this one, of course. And I watched it probably 4 times already. At least 4 different times.
Oh, my condolences.
Yeah. Well, let me open up with some other questions I have here for you. So This one's a bit more revolved around the current circumstances of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, man.
Do you believe there is a relationship between the current situation of the corona pandemic, the Pentagon resurfacing footage that was originally captured in 2005, 2015? It originally got we'll call it leaked. It got intentionally leaked in 2017 through To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, Luis Elizondo, all of these guys. Do you think there's a relationship between why this footage appeared now in the middle of a pandemic, and what's the relationship between them, if there is one? What's your personal opinion on that?
Yeah, man, it's so complicated, right? You know, there's this experiment that was done decades ago. This sort of cruel psychological experiment, you might have heard of it, where these psychologists would, you know, put a dog in this sort of enclosed space with a divider, and so it was divided into two halves, and they would electrify the floor of one half to like give the dog an electric shock, and
Wow.
the dog would jump to the other side, and then they would electrocute that side, and the dog would jump to the other side of the divider, and they would do this back and forth, and then they would electrify both sides, and the dog would jump back and forth, and then just sort of give up and lay there and take it. And they called this learned helplessness, and that's kind of how I've been feeling lately. You know, is just
Wow.
like it's so much happening at once, and you know, I was just talking to Dr. Greer about this, you know, sort of his interpretation of events, and I tend to agree with him that, you know, there's always some crisis that the national security state or the deep state, whatever term you want to use, you know, will use to take control of a presidency, right? So, you know, with Bush, it was 9/11. With Obama, it was the financial crisis.
ISIS.
And now ISIS, exactly. Yeah. And with this, you know, they told Trump, hey, you know, we're going to dump, you know, 2 million dead bodies on the White House lawn if you don't do what we say, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's just been, you know, the largest transfer of wealth in history, you know, and it was an upward transfer of wealth with this CARES Act, and just all kinds of, you know, really alarming things happening. I just see it as a massive power grab.
Yeah.
And you're using the virus to justify it. And it's just also conditioning us to, I mean, look at what happened over fear of this virus, whether the threat was, you know, as real as they said or not. You know, people lost their minds. And I think for me, this really showed that, you know, the false flag alien invasion, which, you know, we've been trying to warn about with Unacknowledged, and we mentioned it again in this film, you know, and even though I know that this is absolutely a real possibility, it never really felt real to me. Like deep down, I never thought it would actually ever do it. But going through this, I'm like, yeah, it would totally work. You know, like it would totally work.
Yeah.
And I still believe that we are seeing, you know, the sort of predictive programming and the, you know, gradual, you know, preparing psychologically for that to happen. I think it's still very much on the table. I'm seeing articles now that there could be the next pandemic could be an alien virus that comes back on one of our spaceships. You know, so you know, it's just, yeah, it's just too juicy of an opportunity for these deep state criminals to not use it. You know, I mean, if I were them, I would totally do the false flag alien invasion. So I think it's very much on the table, and I think that's kind of what we're leading towards, because, you know, I don't doubt the sincerity of Tom DeLonge or Luis Elizondo, but you know, it's just frustrating for me because I spend way too much time on UFO Twitter, and I see so many people who are like, this is it, this is what we've been waiting for, and oh my God, we've never had disclosure at this level. And I'm like, are you joking? Like, go back and watch the Disclosure Project. I mean that was what, you know, Way better.
May 2001. In May 2001, the National Press Club, Greer brought out 30 former military federal employees that all went and testified saying they were involved in USAPs, the unacknowledged special access projects. But to backtrack a bit, I don't think that anything that's going on right now in current events is a coincidence or a matter of just, I mean, you have the Space Force that's being created simultaneously, side by side with the announcement of the Pentagon UFO footage. It's like they're really setting the stage for Independence Day. It almost seems as though you turn on CNN, you turn on Fox, MSNBC, whatever mainstream media outlet that you're watching that's programming you, if you know it or not, and they're really low-key telling you, hey, we're making a Space Force. Hey, we found these things in our airspace that are doing 26,000 miles an hour. Hey, the advanced aerospace threat identification program, like all of this stuff is coming into the stream now. So like, what's going to be the next thing they want the public to be afraid of, as I'm quoting Greer. And the example you used for that psychological experiment with the dog, how you keep shocking and going back and forth, that's all the media is doing. They're trying to constantly direct our focus on what they want it to be on, when there's something behind the scenes going on that is substantially more important than the actual, oh, this is the issue, this is the threat, this is that, this is it, be afraid. And to even touch on it from a more esoteric level, when people are constantly in a state of fear and stress and worry, and they're in that fight or flight response, like I watched Heart and Brain Coherence with Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think his name was. Mm-hmm. I believe that was.
Yeah, he's awesome.
It makes sense. It totally makes sense. You have people that they go home from a stressed day at work. They sit down on the sofa. They're watching stress news coming at them, and it almost seems as though every aspect of your life, you have this unnecessary pressure on you, and that's a form of control, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. Having us in fear and being reactive is the prerequisite for them exerting control on us. And the thing they fear most is an awakened, spiritually connected population. We talk about this in the film, this 1% effect, and coming together with a coherent intention, and we can change the world. Dr. Greer isn't saying that we need to use consciousness and intention to change the world because it's we know it has an effect, and it's the only thing available to us because we're otherwise powerless. No, that's not it. It is literally the only way that we can transform things. Yeah. It is the most powerful position to be in. And there's no law that we could pass, there's no revolution that we could enact. There's nothing else that we could do without first, changing our level of consciousness. Greer has this great line, which is that a civilization's technology matches their level of consciousness. And, it is absolutely a prerequisite for transformation. So we have to stop, just putting all of our faith in, just waiting for a few good leaders, waiting for TTSA, even waiting for Dr. Greer to do it. I mean, he's done incredible work, but now it's up to us, like this cannot go any further until we all get on the same page.
Exactly. And to touch on what you just said, Michael, I totally agree with everything you're saying right now. I mean, a famous quote that I like from Albert Einstein, which you guys use in the film, is, a problem cannot be solved within the same state of consciousness that created it. So until we expand our paradigm, the box that we're in, we're not going to be able to solve all of these problems. I mean, last night I watched a very old VHS tape. I'm currently helping MUFON digitize their archives online. So I came across this old lecture by Brian O'Leary, a former NASA physicist, really smart guy, and it was New Paradigms of Science. And he was, to extend on the example that we're making here, we have all of these problems we're trying to resolve: global warming, poverty, world hunger. And he went through and listed all of these crises, these issues we're facing. And he said, we're not gonna be able to address any of them until we expand out of what we already know, because what we already know has been proven to not be sustainable. It's not working. So I think we're in a place right now, like you said, we have to take the initiative. I mean, I saw Greer back in 2016 just through some YouTube lectures and my own research after experiencing my first UFO encounter. And he inspired me enough to the point that I felt this responsibility. Like you said, when you find out information, you feel this sense of duty and responsibility to do something with it. And the urgency and the sincereness and how genuine he was getting this information across, it really hit me in a different kind of way that, wow, we really are on this fast track of cannibalizing the earth for its resources. There really is this systematic, covert national security state that's controlling all of our aspects of living and our energy, and things need to change. And we have to go around that old system. Something I wanted to ask you as well is, have you had any experiences, UFO sightings or anything at this point, being so involved in it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't until, I started working with Dr. Greer and, learned how to do this stuff that I started having experiences. The best one was actually with Jim Martin, who's in the film, and he's our producer, and he sourced the best footage, some of the best footage in the film came from him. Just him doing CE5 in his backyard in Long Beach. He just got totally incredible stuff.
Yeah.
But I went with him and a group of friends to MacArthur Park near Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. And, we just did these, it was actually in the middle of the day,
Wow.
in a crowded park. And we were surrounded. They didn't come too low, but we were surrounded with these really bizarre looking sort of, I always say they looked like trans-dimensional Chinese dragons. It was really weird and really cool. And someone has the video somewhere because there were a million cameras there. But that was the most interesting one. And, I want to say though that I personally take this idea of, we create our own reality, to an absolute extreme where, all of this secrecy and, national security state evil stuff, well, it's in my reality. So some part of me must have helped create it. And so the most effective way that we're going to change things is to work on ourselves, and to develop ourselves spiritually, and just again taking responsibility for it, and but on a metaphysical level, and saying, okay, we've been all co-creating this reality that we don't like. So instead of screaming at the government or whoever to change it, let's work on ourselves and create something new. I think that's the level of extreme responsibility that we have to take, where we're no longer even blaming other people and we're just literally focusing on co-creating something else.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I personally have gone through a very transcendent growth these last 2 years. Not to get too personal about it, but I went on tour and I had a lot of experiences traveling overseas as a musician, didn't make some of the best decisions. And then I was trying to, point external factors out that caused all of these negative circumstances I was experiencing, until one day I sat back, and really did some self-reflection. And, you realize as above, so below. Your external reality is an exact reflection of your internal reality. And if there's something externally that you don't like, you need to look within you to fix that. None of the answers are outside of you. All of the answers are already there within you, and you already know what these are. intuitively. Yeah, like what Dr. Greer says, you can access this knowing through the deep meditations and becoming, as he said, a drop in the ocean of consciousness, and then you just get all this intuitive flow of information, and then all this stuff comes to you. And CE5, for me personally, started as this fun expedition. A few friends and I were going to go out and see what happens, and then it completely sculpted and started changing my life in ways I didn't realize it was going to, you know?
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. I would love to have you come along on one. We do them, we try.
Are you in LA?
I'm in an undisclosed location in SoCal, but within an hour from LA. Yes. So,
undisclosed. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, let's do it. I would love that.
yeah, that'd be fantastic. We had some pretty incredible sightings. If you have some free time or whenever you're interested, if you go through our page, we also have private archives through a Dropbox link that the public can access. We had a Tesseract 4-dimensional cube come over our group while we were meditating, and it was moving at speeds that I couldn't even. The fact we even captured it on camera was completely intentional, and it was no coincidence that we were able to capture it. So, but yeah,
that is so cool. What kind of meditation do you guys use? Do you do mindfulness or mantra? What are you guys doing?
We bring actually I bring my MacBook out into the field with us, and we broadcast Dr. Greer's guided meditation. And we also bring 2 separate Bluetooth speakers with us. So at the top of our OP, our observation point, we broadcast them. And at the bottom of our OP, we broadcast them as well. So we have this field of the CE5 tones around us while we're all sitting in the middle, and we're vectoring and we're going in and out of meditation, in and out of vectoring. And we have a great team. You know, I love everyone on my team, everyone on the team's family, and the coherence is amazing.
I'd love to do it with you, and I'll see if I can drag Adam along too. This could be fun.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I've been speaking with Adam. I'm going to have lunch with him on Thursday. And
awesome.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about it. I invited him out, but you know, he's a busy guy. His schedule is, you know, everyone has a lot going on. Even me personally, I didn't realize that it got to the point, you know, music's been my life all growing up. You know, I got to travel from it. I met amazing people from it. And then doing music for 11 years, and then only looking into the CE5 for a year, it reached the same level of importance in my life than a passion I've had for a majority of my life. And it really speaks volumes of the implications of it. And it's so cosmically unifying, and with everyone around you, it's amazing.
It is.
But Michael, so we're coming. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We're at 45 minutes. I asked you for only half an hour, so I want to respect that. But is there anything you want to let the people know? Any projects you're currently working on? Any references that you want to put out there?
I can't announce it yet, but I am working on something kind of cool. We're just not at the point where we can announce it. Happy to tell you privately offline. But I will say this, you know, if you go and watch the CE5 movie, or, you know, find the free videos on the internet, you know, Greer, you know, talking about this stuff, you know, we're trying to give you a philosophical and scientific and historical framework to understand the contact experience. But if you don't participate in the experience, this information is worthless to you. Like, you can understand this stuff conceptually all you want, and it's totally meaningless if you don't participate. So that's really what this is all about. And once you participate in it, you don't need to listen to, you know, you don't have to sit there and try to discern, you know, who in the UFO space is telling the truth, and who's lying to you, and who's a disinformation agent, and all this stupid infighting that happens, you know, because you'll have firsthand knowledge. And, you know, I will also say this, people start doing CE5 because they want to see an alien, because that's cool or whatever, but they end up doing it for years, and it becomes part of their lives because of the transcendent states of consciousness that they experience. It is so cool. It is so profound. I encourage everyone to give it a shot. It
Yep.
is the most urgent thing that you can be doing. It isn't just sort of,
Yeah.
some sort of vain sort of exercise just for your own self-amusement. This is the most transformative thing for you and the world that you can participate in. So please just give it a shot.
Of course, I truly believe with all of the activism that's going on right now on our planet, which is all important in their own right. Every single protest, every single nonprofit, all of them are serving that mission that they're setting out to accomplish. But the CE5 protocol, humanity, Earth, cosmically, is the most important mission that humanity has in front of us right now. We're at that crossing point between we're either going to get over this gap, like Michio Kaku says, and become that level 1 civilization, or we're going to allow these systems to continue doing what they're doing, and we're not going to go around them, and we're going to collapse as level 0. So the choice is ours, and we have to take that step and take that initiative. And Michael, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to chat with you personally. I'm in the area. We can definitely make a good CE5 experience happen. And we document all of our recaps for our own research and our own database. But thank you for your time, my friend. Namaste.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
Take care, my friend. Okay, everybody. That was Michael Mazzola, the director of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, director of Unacknowledged, funder for Serious Disclosure. I want to personally thank Dr. Stephen Greer for his moral courage, his passion, his commitment, his intellect, and everything he's done for humanity. You know, Dr. Greer's the person that inspired me to take the initiative and to take the action for many, many years to research it, and truly, truly amazing. I want to thank Jan Harzan, the executive director of MUFON. He's been a mentor to me for several months now. He granted me the responsibility of assisting MUFON in digitizing their archives, as well as potentially assisting them in their social media efforts. I want to also thank Ricky Butterfass for all the amazing feedback he's given me and my team on all of our CE5 expeditions we've been on. I want to thank Adam Curry for all the great information and research he's done, which I've been looking into very deeply. And every single person that's a member of our community. You guys are going to be the future of light workers and informants that are going to help wake up the rest of humanity to what's really going on. So that being said, our next CE5 expedition recap is going to be uploaded today at some point. So be on the lookout for that. And until next time, thank you. Namaste.